Welcome to today's episode of the Triple F podcast. I'm Jim Hochberg. We'll be joined by Eva Andrade momentarily. But, we're going to talk today about an issue that's kind of been bugging me. And that is, in public life these days, everybody has an opinion and everybody's quite free to express their opinion. And nobody actually cares, seemingly, to talk about what the facts might be. So we're going to kind of delve into that today. So let's talk about it. Miss Andrade, hello.
Mr. Hochberg, how goes it?
Good.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We're so pleased to have you.
So the issue that we want to talk about is one that's really driven by available information, and everybody gets information from different sources, I think. I mean, it really appears to me that people have such divergent views of what life is because the news sources are selective. They don't care about sharing news they don't think is good to know. And so people get their news from places and there's no common knowledge anymore. That's the phrase, no common knowledge. So one of the big issues is, unless you've been living under a rock, is there any evidence or is there not any evidence?
I have been living under the rock. I live under the rock of the ages.
Okay. Getting back to the topic. So, is there evidence that President Biden should be investigated, which the House is doing? They're doing an inquiry into whether there should be an impeachment proceeding for having committed high crimes or misdemeanors under the United States Constitution. If you get your news from one place, they say, there's no facts, there's no facts, there's no fact. You hear that no matter what somebody else may share as facts, one team is unanimous. There are no facts. So the thought that occurred to me for today's show is we want to show a little 3.5-4 minute clip of a hearing that took place September 28th, 2023 in Congress. And it's Missouri Congressman. His name is Representative Jason Smith. And he's introducing the subject of what's the evidence that people are so happy to say doesn't exist? Because if you say something doesn't exist, you don't have to talk about it anymore. So let's run that clip.
Yesterday, the Ways and Means Committee released new documents showing President Biden was not just aware of his son's business dealings, but he was connected to them. In a newly released message to a Chinese business executive, Hunter Biden mentions preserving the, quote, keys to my family's only asset. That asset, Joe Biden. New evidence released in response to questions raised by members of the committee on both sides when Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, the two IRS whistleblowers, testified in July, paints a disturbing picture of a revolving door between Joe Biden's office and Hunter Biden's business partners. According to a worksheet provided by IRS whistleblower Ziegler, then Vice President Biden's April 2014 official visit to Ukraine occurred only days after a series of White House meetings with Hunter Biden and his business associates regarding Ukraine. Shortly after Joe Biden returned stateside, the Ukrainian company Burisma announced Hunter Biden's appointment to its board. New evidence provided shows Hunter Biden using his father's position to gain favor with billionaire Miguel Alemán, including having Joe Biden host them at the White House in February of 2014 at the vice president's residence alongside Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim in November of 2015. And then in 2016, using Air Force Two to shuttle Hunter Biden and his business associate to Mexico City. Whether it was lunches, phone calls, White House meetings, or official foreign trips, Hunter Biden cashed in by arranging access to Joe Biden, the family brand. The Biden family and their associates received millions in payments from foreign sources, including from Russia, China, Ukraine, Romania. In one email, Hunter Biden even bragged that he cut a deal for $10 million from just one company for, quote, introductions alone. And yet the DOJ wanted to keep the spotlight as far from Joe Biden as possible. One of the items we released yesterday was an IRS interview with James Biden, the president's brother, in September of 2022. The agency was barred in the interview from asking him about Joe Biden and about whether Joe Biden was involved in Hunter Biden's deal with a Chinese energy company. And when Hunter Biden had his tax liability of over $2 million mysteriously paid for by a Democrat Party donor named Kevin Morris, who he barely knew, something IRS investigators saw as a possible campaign finance violation, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf said she did not want any of the agents to look into the allegation. On the board are notes Agent Shapley took from that meeting. He notes that Wolf told investigators that she was not, quote, personally interested in pursuing it. This is the same attorney Wolf who, in an email we released yesterday, responded to IRS investigators seeking approval for a search warrant with, quote, there should be nothing about political figure one in here, that being a reference by definition of Joe Biden. The Biden family sold access to Joe Biden's power, and the Biden Justice Department protected the Biden brand. We must continue to follow the facts.
So the question is, if you never saw that in Congress in the end of September, or if you have family members or friends who don't believe there are any facts, they never saw that, there's going to be a link to that down below somewhere in Magic Computer Land that we want you to share that with people, because if in fact people are holding opinions without evidence to support the truth or falsity of their opinion, that's just not good for our country. You can't have a country that's self-governing if the people don't, if they have no information. And there seems to be, depending on where you get your news, very strong efforts to keep the story one side or the other.
And that clip, we showed it in its entirety directly from his Twitter page. So we didn't, take an excerpt of it. We didn't pull out what we thought was important. That was the entire clip that's posted on that representative's Twitter page or X page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. How are we going to deal? Is it like forever formerly, like Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince? Are they going to have to forever say what used to be called Twitter?
I have heard it go both ways. Like I've heard people say, I'm still going to call it tweets, no matter what this new thing is. People call it X, whatever. But the point is that we didn't, make that fit what we wanted to talk about today. That's the clip in its entirety.
And we always say, go to the source. Get the full story. Don't take the spin from somewhere else. And so we obviously would want to put the whole thing in ourselves, right?
Yeah. So the other thing that we're going to be talking about today, you provided to me, and we'll make sure we make this link available for people watching and listening, that this is a summary of all the events focusing on the federal authorities' pursuit of this alleged Biden family corruption. We have to say alleged, and we have to say in this country you're innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
So that's what's happening right now. Is they're having the hearing, they're checking facts, they're interviewing people to find out what's true and what's not true. But
well, let's be very clear on that. When Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House and she impeached Donald Trump several times, those were hearings to call for the vote of impeachment, which is like charging him with a crime that then has to be in the Senate, is where the trial of guilt or innocence is.
Right.
That's not what the House is doing right now. What the House is doing right now is inquiring into whether there should be an impeachment or not.
But they are.
So they're gathering. See, what happened is, because the Republicans are in charge of the House by a majority vote, and the Democrats are in charge of the White House by President Biden's election, and the White House runs the Department of Justice. When a committee of the House, that's just one of those regular oversight committees, wants to subpoena somebody that's not participating in the oversight investigation, the House doesn't really have any authority to force them to show up. They have to ask the Department of Justice to enforce their subpoena. So if the investigation is of President Biden or Hunter Biden or whatever, somebody, that the Department of Justice isn't interested in enforcing the subpoena, they can't. However, this inquiry into an impeachment committee is a different committee. It has extra powers. And so they can enforce it other than going strictly through the Department of Justice. So what they're trying to do is get answers to the questions through the impeachment inquiry committee that were not being given by the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee. So they're still trying to get the answers to the questions while the Democrats are saying, there's nothing here. I never said it.
Yeah.
You never knew anything about
Nothing
Hunter's
to see
stuff.
here.
You know, so if we want to have a government that reflects us, we're self-governed people, we have to have the information. If the information is being withheld from us, we have to do things within the law to get the information. And that's all this is.
I know, but I have watched some really interesting court cases. And I know this is not a court case, but bear with me for a sec. I've watched these really good court cases where you have the defense and the prosecution and they're questioning. And I love to watch that when one will try to say, okay, here's my point. Here's why we got to move here. And the other side will come up and ask these really drilling questions that suddenly throws all of that out of the water. I find that interesting. I would appreciate it if that's what our House members were doing. But I've watched it. It's not. So what happens is you might have a good question thrown in by both sides. You might have a Democrat asking a good question, a Republican asking. But so many people use the opportunity to use their time to talk about how the other side is just insane.
Or, yeah, basically what it is, and this has been this way since Bill Clinton's impeachment. And maybe even before then, but I don't remember anything before that. So what happens is whoever's in charge of the committee has a goal for the hearing. And they want to find out certain information, and they are asking these certain questions. The other party that's not in charge of the committee isn't interested in the answers to the question. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't need to be in the hearing, right? They would have worked together and gotten it otherwise. So what happens is the party that's not in charge of the committee does the big shiny object over here distraction thing. And so what I end up doing is watching the questions from the people that are actually trying to get answers. And then when the other guy gets his 5 minutes, I go to the bathroom, I get something to eat, because I know it's useless. And it's back and forth and back and forth.
You would think that somebody who's elected to office would do their very best. So, in other words, if I was a Democrat and I was watching this, I would use my time to prove what the other side is doing is wrong, not attack them because they're the other side.
Right.
That's how I would do it if I was elected to office. I just think that we have moved to a place in our society that we don't ever really get to the heart of the matter anymore. Even some of the Republican questions.
Well, but I just had a thought, and I wished I'd had it earlier because I could have double checked the source and the quote. But our founding fathers, and I'm not going to guess which one it was, I think it was one of the anti-federalists, was very worried about having political parties because political parties end up preserving themselves rather than doing the work for the people and the good of the country. And if that was in the 18th century, in the 1780s and 90s, it's worse now.
I know, because you know that if you were to do a voter guide and take off the parties so that people didn't know who it was, and you didn't even have like their name or their face. You just said, here's what this person believes. I wonder how many people would get elected.
Well, nobody would know not to vote for them because you didn't say who they were.
Well, no, you wouldn't need to. You just, here's what they stand for. They're running for this office, and here's all the things they stand for. Here's the not the campaigns. Here's the nonprofits they give to. Here, that would tell you a lot. I mean, let's come back to this report. So
Real Clear Investigations.com is a website that I stumbled upon from a link. A guy named Ben Weingarten put this thing together. It's interesting, when you have a web page and it's like you're good at making things pretty on the screen and pictures and all this stuff. But if you want to print that out, it doesn't work very well. So what I stumbled upon is there's this little rectangular box at the far right of the space that has the URL. If you click on that, it turns into just text.
I was able to do that very easily.
Well,
and look how nice mine is. But Jim.
But anyway, the thing is, it didn't paginate the numbers, and I double-sided printed the thing. How many pages did your printout have?
30.
Okay, so it's a 30-page list of the timeline answering the question, what did the feds not do about alleged Biden family corruption, and when did they not do it? Which I really like, because it's the flip on the current what did Nixon know and when did he know it, right?
I love I love the timeline, because you're able to see, okay, so starting back in November 2018, the Internal Revenue Service's Washington, D.C. office, they opened the investigation into Hunter Biden. The code name at the time was Sportsman, okay? I like that. But as you heard in the clip, we're talking about events that started back in 2014, 2015.
Well, and that's the point, because before we got into each specific, in which we're not going to be able to, in fact, the other thing that when you ask it to click on that little rectangle and become text, it tells you how long it should take you to read it, which I find really odd.
Average. It's an average.
No, for this 30-something pager is going to take somebody between 45 and 57 minutes. Now, come on. Why didn't they say 45 and an hour? How did they get 57 minutes?
It's an average. Averages work that way.
57. Why didn't they say college. 53? I mean, this is so weird.
No, the numbers people they're getting excited. They're going to tell you the whole reason why. But I think what's really interesting is, so when I was able to print the report, I was able to do a thing like, how many times was Trump mentioned, right, in this whole thing? And so it was probably about 30 something times. How many times was Biden mentioned?
Which Biden?
Just Biden.
Oh,
the name Biden. 170 times. How many times was the DOJ? 33 times. IRS, 53. So, I mean, it's really, you can start seeing the key players. Now, that's not especially like with the IRS, right? You have to be careful with that, because IRS could be in the middle of a word too, and they would have counted that too. So it's not an exact science, but
like first.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. So, it's not that exact, but the point is that you're able to see very quickly what they're focusing in on this report. And I thought it was interesting how it's all interwoven with what's happening with Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah, that's very interesting, huh? When these guys do something in secret, Nancy Pelosi's out there doing it in public against Trump. It's very interesting. Yeah. But before we even get to that, what I want to remind us of is what pretty much the news was telling us from 2019, 2020, 2021, 22. Remember, there was a laptop that was in Rudy Giuliani's possession, copy of it. And it was supposedly
that Russian disinformation.
It was supposedly a copy of the hard drive of Hunter Biden's laptop that Hunter Biden brought to a Delaware computer store to repair and then forgot and never picked it up. But he did have a drug problem back then.
Yes.
So we remember that, right? And then we remember there was a letter published right before the election in 2020 by 55 former intelligence leaders of the U.S. government.
I looked at the letter, plus 7 people who didn't want to be named.
and remember, this letter said the laptop story was Russian disinformation, or probably, or had the hallmarks of, or whatever. So we remember those things, and they came to us out of our televisions or computer screens on the day it was in the news. The interesting thing about this timeline is you find out way before you heard about that computer on the TV, way before you heard about that letter on the computer, it was in a timeline by the Justice Department and the IRS. They knew about it. So what I wanted to do was say, let's break into two pieces this timeline. And we'll say piece one is after November 3rd through November 7th, 2020, which is on about page 14.
Okay.
Because that was the presidential election in 2020 when Joe Biden won and has been the 46th president. That'll be the second piece. That's part two.
Okay.
What happened before then that we didn't know was going on that ended up coming out after the election? Very, very interesting. That's why I would, and we don't have time to go through 30-something pages of, it's just fact. Oh, I'm being told we're running out of time.
Yes, because it's a lot of good information.
Okay. So we're not going to be able to touch any of it because if we touch some and not the rest, you'll get the wrong impression.
But I like how you're kind of giving people, I want to know. So maybe they're going to want to pull this report and read it for themselves.
I really, really hope you do because it's
now,
amazing.
Let me say, to be fair, okay, the report is probably much longer than 30 pages. And the reason I say that is because I took out all the pictures. You have all those
Mine
big
comes
pictures.
with the pictures. Don't you want to know who's who?
I wanted to get to the text because I'm one of those people that can read it in 45 minutes. So looking at the pictures to me weren't important to the story. I wanted to get the facts, and I learned that from you. So,
well, thank you.
But in any case,
well, you know what? There's a summary that we can do really quickly. In November of 2018 through June of 2020, this was before the laptop showed up. Hunter Biden probe begins. President Trump is impeached while pursuing Biden-Ukraine information. Justice Department allegedly undermining the probe begins. June 2020 to December 21, evidence of influence peddling with nexus to Joe Biden grows. Alleged sabotage of Hunter Biden probe intensifies.
Now, January 2022 through January 2023, the prosecution is sought and denied. IRS whistleblowers blindsided by what they characterize as U.S. Attorney David Weiss's apparent lack of authority. And then from February 2023 to May 2023, Hunter's counsel pleads case over Weiss's head. IRS whistleblowers emerge and face a chill. Plea deal develops.
And then there's an election in 2022. The Congress changes in January. In June of 2023, while the Congress is trying to get information, the FBI is stonewalling over alleged Burisma Biden bribes. Trump indictments grow. Plea deal emerges. Mr. Weiss strains to harmonize his story. I mean, this goes all the way up to August 2023 to the president. Another Trump indictment. Weiss gets special counsel authority he wasn't supposed to need. Anyway, you really got to read this. Get this timeline. Take a look at it. Share it with your family and friends that swear there's no evidence. Because there is.
Yeah, when you're hearing these things on the news, whether you're looking at it through social media or watching news, make sure that you're taking time to go to the sources. Don't just listen to the talking heads because you could be led astray. And we don't want you to do that because you watch this show. And
I actually have friends that post stuff. And when I look at their post, I call them or I text them or email them and say, where did you get that? And they don't go to the source.
In the meantime, stop right now. Go down and like this video. Make sure you share it with your friends. Hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And we will see you next week. Mahalo.
Aloha.